Morning. Good morning, brother. It's nice to see all of you here today. We're going to be studying from Mark chapter 5, 21 through 43 today. If you want to turn there, because the verses won't be up on the screen, if you want to follow along. Especially for you, those who are older, but even for those who are young, at times we feel discouraged, we feel frustrated, depressed. We have our good days, we have our bad days. Sometimes it just seems like everything is going wrong in our lives. Nothing seems to go right. We're struggling with problems or issues or sickness or whatever in our life that's going on. And sometimes it's, we think, is things going to improve? Is there going to be better days to come? And I think for most of us who are older, we've had times in our lives like that. And for those of you who are younger, maybe not gone through those times, but you will if you live long enough. So just kind of a warning there. But we're going to look at two people today, Jarius and the woman with the hemorrhage, who struggled in their lives with some things. And they came to Jesus because Jesus gave them hope. Let's look at Mark chapter 5 and verse 21. Mark chapter 5, verse 21. When Jesus had crossed over again in the boat to the other side, a large crowd gathered around him, and so he stayed by the seashore. And one of the synagogue officials named Jarius came up, and on seeing him, fell at his feet, and implored him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Please come and lay your hands on her so that she will get well and live." He was a synagogue official there, Jarius, and he had a daughter who was 12 years old, who was at the point of death. And so probably she had some kind of disease. She was sick or something. The text doesn't say that, but or why she was dying, but we could probably guess she had been sick. Whether it was just a recent illness, whether she'd been sick all of her life. Again, the text doesn't say. But, I don't know if any parents out there have ever lost a child to death or not. Here in America, it's not as common anymore. Back in the 1800s, maybe early 1900s, a lot of families, a lot of parents had lost at least, one child to death. Being over in Indonesia for 17 years, I saw several parents lose a child to death because of sickness or an accident or something, and it's really devastating, especially when a child is going through sickness. Christian Payawa, one of the leaders of the church there in Sarui, where I was at, he has like 12, 13 kids, I forgot, a lot of kids. But one of his children, Leah, she'd been sick most of her life. She had some kind of respiratory disease. And at times, she did well. At times, she was weak and she had a hard time breathing. She was a bright, intelligent kid. But Chris and his wife, Betty, they took her to doctors. And they even went out of the province, to other parts of Indonesia trying to find someone, some doctor who could cure her, who could, find some help so she can get better. And but they couldn't, and she started to get weaker and weaker, and she finally passed away. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and it's just really, really hard to see a parent lose a child. And I've seen other parents there lose children as well. And parents will do almost anything for their children, especially when their children is sick and to the point of death. Having the church pray for them, taking the doctors to hospitals, expend all kinds of money, whatever, to try to find something to help their child because they love their child. And I'm sure Jarius and his wife felt the same way. They wanted to find something, something, to help their child so their child get better. Their child was at a point of death. And Jarius heard about Jesus. Jesus was coming into town, and he took a chance that maybe Jesus could come and heal her. So Jarius comes to Jesus, and he falls down on his knees and imploring, begging Jesus, please come to my house and save my daughter because she's at the point of death. But Jairus didn't know what else to do. His daughter was about to die. He didn't know how much longer she had to live. And Jesus was his only hope at that time. So Jesus agreed, and Jesus and Jairus started off to Jairus' house. Then we come to the woman with the hemorrhage. Let's look at Mark chapter 5, verses 24. And he went off with him, with Jairus, and a large crowd was following him and pressing in on him. In verse 25, a woman who had a hemorrhage for 12 years. This woman had a hemorrhage for 12 years. She fought and battled this disease, whatever it was, for 12 long years. Some of you probably can't remember 12 years ago. You're little kids. 12 years is a long time. For a lot of you, that's more than half your life. And she battled this disease for 12 years. And more than just the disease, this disease made her unclean according to the law. If we go back to Leviticus chapter 15 and verse 25, and the law says, now if a woman has a discharge of her blood many days, not at the period of her menstrual impurity, or if she has a discharge beyond that period, all the days of her impure discharge she shall continue as though in her menstrual impurity. She is unclean. And so for 12 long years she suffered this uncleanness. And uncleanness for a Jew was something that was bad because you couldn't go to the synagogue. You were kind of cut off from social life and stuff. Going on with Leviticus chapter 15 and verse 26, it says, any bed on which she lies all the days of her discharge shall be to her like her bed at menstruation, and everything in which she sits shall be unclean, like her uncleanness at that time. So basically anything she laid on, anything she sat on would become unclean. And anybody else, going on to verse 27, it says, whoever touches them shall be unclean, and wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until evening. So anything she sat on would be unclean. And then if somebody else who was clean came and sat on that chair or bench or pew or whatever, they would also become unclean. And more than that, she was unclean as in the time of her monthly period. Going back to chapter 15 and verse 19 of Leviticus, it says, if a woman has a discharge, if her discharge in her body is blood, she shall continue in her menstrual impurity for 7 days, and whoever touches her shall be unclean until evening. So even if anybody touched her, gave her a hug or touched her or whatever, would be unclean. And so she was pretty much, cut off from any social interaction. She was considered unclean. And just kind of imagine for 12 years not being able to socially interact with others, not being able to go to the synagogue, not being able to have interaction with your friends or family or whatever, because they would become unclean. For 12 long years, she was more or less like a social outcast. We can kind of apply this to our own lives as we are unclean in our sin. We're spiritually sick, all of us. At one time, we're spiritually sick, separated from God, and we cannot cure ourselves. And so many people in this world, like Mike was talking about, they're off looking for healing, but they're looking at in the wrong place. They're looking for love in all the wrong places, Mike said. They're looking at it, with drugs or alcohol or sex or partying or obtaining wealth or money or power or becoming famous or having a sex change or whatever. They're looking for something. It's because they're spiritually sick and they don't know they're spiritually sick. And it's only Jesus who can heal us. People are looking for something more in life. It's only Jesus that can give that. Well, this woman with the hemorrhage, it says, let's continue on with Mark chapter 5 and verse 26. It says that she had endured much at the hands of many physicians and had spent all that she had and was not helped at all, but rather had grown worse. So she went to physicians to try to find some kind of medicine or healing. Probably much like Jarius and his wife, trying to find a physician or healing for their daughter, even though the text doesn't say about Jarius, but I kind of think it's probably about the same. The two cases are similar, are the same. I'm sure Jarius went around and tried to find some doctor or medicine or something that could heal his daughter and couldn't. This woman with a hemorrhage, she went all around, probably in her town and other towns, spending all the money that she had, and then she tried to work and save up some more money so she could maybe go someplace else and find somebody else, find some other potion or medicine or something to heal her for 12 long years. Think about that. I don't know if you've struggled with an illness for 12 years or not. Some people do. Maybe they struggle with cancer or with a heart condition or some other disease for 12 years. And it takes a toll on you. It takes a toll on you mentally, physically, not only on you, but on your family as well. For 12 long years, she's trying to find some help. And for all this time, she's a social outcast through no fault of her own. She just got this disease, and she's struggling with it. And she went and she spent all of her money, all that she had. She was trying to find a cure. Going on with verse 27, it says, after hearing about Jesus, she came up in the crowd behind him and touched his cloak. She heard about Jesus. She had faith. She had faith that Jesus could heal her. Think about her frustration and her depression, trying to get healed, and nobody could heal her, and she was just getting worse. And then she heard about Jesus, that Jesus could heal people. And a hope kind of arose in her heart that maybe Jesus could help me. I've gone to all these other physicians. I've tried all these other medicines, these potions. I've tried everything. And nothing's helped. I'm just getting worse and worse and worse. I can't be around anybody. I can't go to the synagogue. I can't do anything. But Jesus, maybe Jesus can help me. And really, Jesus is the only one who can help us. We can go through all this world and try to find something to satisfy our life, to try to find purpose in our life, to try to find that something, that emptiness, to fill that emptiness in our soul. And we're not going to find it out in the world. It's not out in the world. And we can spend all the money that we have and spend all of our time we have and travel all around the world, and we're not going to find it because only Jesus has what we truly need in our lives. And this woman heard about Jesus, and hope arose in her heart. She had faith. She came and kind of snuck up to Jesus to touch his cloak, hoping in faith that she would be healed. Faith leads to action. If we have true faith, it leads to action. She heard about Jesus. She heard that Jesus healed people, and she thought, maybe Jesus can heal me too. She believed Jesus could heal her, so she took action according to her faith. And she didn't care what anybody else thought. She was unclean. She shouldn't have been there in that crowd. It's, going back to verse 26, it says, verse 24, it says, the crowd was pressing in on him. If we follow Jesus' life, we don't know the number of people who followed Jesus all the time, but at one point Jesus fed 5,000 people. I'm sure just 5,000 men, not including women and children, so there's probably 10,000 people there or more. Another time he fed 4,000 men. So we know that hundreds and even thousands of people followed Jesus, and they're all there pressing in on him. And she shouldn't have been there because anybody that she bumped into or touched, she would have made unclean. But she didn't care. What she wanted was healing, and she wouldn't let anything stand in her way. She didn't care what other people thought. She believed that Jesus could heal her, and she was going to get to Jesus one way or another. And that's the kind of faith that we need to have. And we don't care what people think. If we know that Jesus can save us, if we know that Jesus can heal us, if we know that Jesus can fill that emptiness in our heart, we're going to come to Jesus, and we're not going to care what other people think. We're going to come to Jesus and find that healing and find that fulfillment in our lives. We're going to confess it to others. So she took action according to her faith, because faith, true faith, leads to action. If I believe that something to be true, then I'm going to act on it. I'm going to live my life as if that thing or that belief is true. She didn't let anything stand in the way. But why was she so sneaky? Let's see, verse 27, after hearing about Jesus, she came up in the crowd behind him and touched his cloak. For she thought, if I just touch his garment, I will get well. That's what she was thinking. And I'm not sure exactly why she just didn't come up to Jesus and say, Jesus, I've been having this hemorrhage for 12 years. Could you please heal me? If we look at Jesus' life through the Gospels, most people, except for her who wanted some healing, they came to Jesus and asked Jesus to heal him or her or whoever. So why was she kind of sneaky? We can only speculate. The text doesn't say. Maybe she didn't want to bother Jesus. She saw hundreds or thousands of people around Jesus, and maybe she knew Jesus was teaching or whatever, and she didn't want to bother him. She just thought, I don't need to bother Jesus. He's busy with others and stuff. If I just touch his garment, I know I'll be healed, and I don't have to bother Jesus. Maybe she didn't want. Maybe she thought that. I put him up here. Yeah, she didn't want to bother Jesus. Maybe she was afraid that Jesus would refuse her. And if she came to Jesus because she was unclean or something, maybe she was afraid Jesus would say no and refuse to heal her. Possibly. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe because she was unclean, she didn't want others to know about it because she shouldn't have been there in that crowd. Because if she was kind of trying to get to Jesus, she's had to say, excuse me, and she was kind of running into people and trying to get close to Jesus. And if others there knew that she was unclean, they would be upset and say, lady, woman, you're not supposed to be here. You're unclean. Get out of here. Maybe she didn't want others to know. Not really know why she was sneaky about it. But she was healed when she touched his garment. It says immediately the flow of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her affliction. And what joy she must have had that after 12 long years of struggling with this disease and of going around and trying to find some help from doctors and medicines and spending all that she has and then working some more to save up some more money so she can go to another doctor and not finding any help but just getting worse and worse and worse, that now she was healed. She must have been ecstatic and joyful. I can't imagine how she felt. But she was healed because of her faith. So verse 30, immediately Jesus, perceiving in himself that the power proceeding from him had gone forth, turned around in the crowd and said, who touched me? Who touched my garments? Who touched me? The disciples kind of thought that was kind of a silly question. Verse 31, it says, and his disciples said to Jesus, you see the crowd pressing in on you, and you say, who touched me? It's kind of silly. Who touched me? But Jesus knew that somebody had come up and touched him, for some healing. And he looked around to see the woman who had done this. When Jesus turned around and said, who touched me? I don't know what that woman was thinking. Was she kind of terrified? Maybe she thought she did something wrong. Was Jesus going to rebuke her or scold her? And I don't know which was going on in her mind at that time. This was, Jesus, he was a popular rabbi, popular teacher walking around. And, she didn't want to get into trouble. But, Jesus didn't want that woman to go away thinking she had done something wrong. Jesus wanted to give her a blessing. Jesus cares about all of us, and Jesus loves all of us, and Jesus wants to bless all of us. He didn't want her to go away thinking that she had taken advantage of her in some way. And so when the woman saw that let's see, verse 33, but when the woman, fearing and trembling, she was kind of afraid there, aware of what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. Now, I'm not sure exactly what she said. If she just kind of gave a short summary. I've been sick with a hemorrhage for 12 years, and I knew that you could heal me, and I knew if I just came up and touched your garments that I would be healed. Maybe that's all she said. Or maybe she was one of these women, who could change a 2-minute story into a 2-hour story. Well, Jesus, about 12 years ago, I woke up and I had this blood, and I was bleeding, and after a week or so, I was still bleeding, and so I went to the doctor, and he gave me some medicine, and maybe it helped a little bit, but I was still bleeding a little bit, and went to another doctor, and he gave me something else, but it still really didn't help. So I went to this other town and to this other doctor, and my money was getting kind of low, and it still wasn't helping. Then my cousin Esther, she said, well, down in Jericho, there was this woman who had a hemorrhage, and Dr. Abraham down there, he healed her, so maybe you should go down there. But I didn't have the money, so I was saving up all this money. And when I got the money saved up, my cousin Esther and her husband and I, we traveled all the way down to Jericho. And I don't know if she told everything. There's some people who can just go on and on about their story. So whether this took 2 minutes or 5, 10 minutes, a half an hour, I don't know. But Jesus stood there and gave her his full attention and listened to her story and all that had happened to her, because Jesus cares about us. Jesus cares about everybody. For Jesus, every single person is important. Whether it's a woman with a hemorrhage, whether it's a blind man, whether it's a leper, whether it's a person who's demon-possessed, whether it's Jarius, a synagogue official, whoever it is, every single person is important to Jesus. No matter how small or low in the totem pole you are, or how big or how high or important you are, Jesus cares about each and every one of you. So this woman tells Jesus her story, tells her the whole truth, and confesses. And it's good for us to confess. The woman didn't do anything wrong. Her disease that she had was just a disease that she contracted somehow, not because of some sin that she did. She wasn't really wrong in coming up and touching Jesus' cloak. Jesus never rebuked her for that, as if she did something wrong. But sometimes it's good for us to talk about our problems, to talk about our struggles, to talk about what's on our mind with others, because it helps us to process through those things. It gives us some relief. And in this case, she's confessing her faith to Jesus in front of others. And, we don't need to be secret believers in Jesus. We need to freely confess our faith to others, that we believe in Jesus, no matter what other people think. And Jesus gave her a blessing. Jesus says, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." Jesus so much wanted to give her a blessing and wanted her to go away in peace, knowing that Jesus really wanted to help her, that Jesus wasn't upset that maybe she somehow took advantage of her. Jesus loved her. Jesus cared about her, and Jesus sent her away in peace. What a beautiful story that is. Where were we? Remember Jarius? Remember what was going on with Jarius? His daughter was about to die, or is about to die, very sick. Do you think Jarius kind of impatient, kind of frustrated? I mean, Jarius came and begging and imploring Jesus, "Come to my house because my daughter's about to die. I don't know what else to do. Come and lay your hands on her so that she'll be made well." And then on the way, this woman with a hemorrhage comes and touches Jesus' cloak, and Jesus will stop and, "Who touched me?" And after a couple minutes, this woman comes and tells her story, and Jesus, paying her attention and everything, and I'm sure Jarius is over there standing. "Come on, Jesus. Come on, lady. Get on with it. My daughter's dying." I don't know what was going through Jairus' mind, but I'm sure, I've never been a parent, but and as a kind of imagine a parent, you as a parent, and your child is about to die, maybe in the next hour, you don't know. And there's a traffic jam, you get to the hospital and there's a long line in ER or at the doctor's office, you have to wait or whatever. Jesus there talking with this woman. Can't you talk with this woman later? My daughter's about to die. You can come back and talk to her later if you want to. But let's come, Jesus, come on, let's go. I'm sure he was kind of impatient and frustrated, and I think sometimes we're like that too with God. We kind of get impatient and frustrated with God because God doesn't act on our time schedule. We want Jesus to act now. We want God to act now. We pray to God for something. We want God to answer now, today. Sometimes God just waits and lets us wait. We go through this turmoil about not knowing what's going to happen. And does God love us? Does God care about us? Is God going to answer us or not? Is God going to take care of us? Is this thing going to get better? And we get impatient with God sometimes. God always acts, and God acts in his own time because God knows ultimately what's best for us. And sometimes God wants us to go through this period of silence, this period of suffering, this period of impatience to teach us something. But God already has a plan for our lives. God already knows what he's going to do. And God's going to act at the time when it's best for us, when God sees that it's best for us. That we just need to have patience. And I don't know what was going through Jairus' mind. Let's read on with verse 35. While Jesus was still speaking to the lady, to the woman there, giving her the blessing, they came from the house of the synagogue official saying, "Your daughter has died. Why trouble the teacher anymore?" Think of how Jairus must have felt, how devastated he was that his daughter had just died. And then things that going through his mind, what if? What if this woman had not touched Jesus' cloak? What if Jesus had not turned around and said, "Who touched me?" What if Jesus had not given his full attention to this woman? What if this woman had taken so long to tell her story? What if Jesus had come yesterday? What if? And that's a natural question. Those things go through our mind. When bad things happen to us, we always think, what if? And that's part of the grieving process. That's part of our human nature. We think of what if. And we can't go back and change the past. We have to face reality now. But we're always thinking about, what if in these circumstances. Your child has died. Why bother the teacher anymore? Up until this time, Jesus had never raised anyone from the dead. Jesus had cured a lot of people. He'd cast out demons. He'd cured other people with various illnesses. But he had never raised anybody from the dead. And so apparently, Jairus and his family, they didn't believe that Jesus could raise anybody from the dead. And so his child had died, his daughter had died, and so there's no use in bothering Jesus anymore. But Jesus said, verse 36, but Jesus, overhearing what was being spoken, said to the synagogue official, "Do not be afraid. Just believe." Just believe. And if you don't get anything else from this lesson today, I want you to get this point. Don't be afraid. Just believe. Because so many things happen in our lives and will happen in our lives and have happened in our lives. Whether it's Hurricane Andrew that comes through and destroys our homes and everything that we have, whether we've lost a loved one, whether we're struggling with some kind of sickness or illness, whatever it might be that we're struggling through, whatever problems. And sometimes it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel, even if there is an end of the tunnel, we don't know. We don't know what God's doing. We've been praying to God day and night, and it doesn't seem anything's changing. It just seems like, with the woman of the hemorrhage, things are just getting worse. We spent all that we had. We spent all of our energy, our money, our time. We're just mentally tired, physically tired, spiritually tired, and it doesn't seem anything is helping. Where is God? Why is God silent? Why isn't God helping me? We get impatient. Jesus says, don't be afraid. Just believe. We need to trust in Jesus. We need to trust in God, that God does know what's going on, that God does have a plan, that for some reason that we don't know at that time, God is allowing us to go through those troubles, those circumstances, because he has a greater plan for our life. And we just need to believe in God and trust in God that better days will come. God will come and help us. We just need to believe. We need to trust him. Don't be afraid. Don't worry. Don't be anxious. Just believe. I know it's easier said than done. But don't be afraid. Just believe. Jesus has everything under control. He has a plan. He already knew that was going to happen. But he wanted to give a greater blessing to Jarius and to his family. So, reading on, verse 37, and he allowed no one to accompany him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. And they came to the house of the synagogue official, and he saw a commotion and people loudly weeping and wailing, because his daughter had just died, and his family and friends and neighbors were there, and they were wailing and grieving and crying because of the death of a child, because it just hurts so much when a child dies, a child that has her whole life in front of her. At 12 years old, her life is cut short and she has passed away. And so they're crying and they're wailing and they're weeping and they're grieving. And verse 39, and entering in, Jesus said to them, why make a commotion and weep? The child has not died, but is asleep. And they began laughing at him. Jesus just came here. What does this guy know? We've been here, for a while. We know when somebody has died. There's no pulse, there's no heartbeat, there's no breath, there's no movement. He just came in. Who does he think he is? I would have been offended if I was there. If it wasn't Jesus, it was somebody else, I would have been offended. But for some reason, they laughed at him. They thought it was funny. I don't know what was so funny about it, but they laughed at him. But putting them out, going on to verse 40, but putting them out, he took along the child's father and mother and his own companions and entered the room where the child was. And taking the child by the hand, he said to her, Talitha cum, which translated means, little girl, I say to you, get up. And immediately the girl got up and began to walk, for she was 12 years old. And immediately they were completely astounded. And he gave them strict orders that no one should know about this. And he said that something should be given her to eat. And so Jesus rose her from the dead, and they were all utterly amazed, because this is the first time in the gospel records that Jesus had risen somebody from the dead. And Jarius got a great blessing. He saw a great miracle happen there. I'm sure he and his wife were just filled with joy, just like the woman with the hemorrhage was probably filled with joy and ecstatic because Jesus came and helped them in their time of trouble. There are better days ahead. If you're struggling with things in your life right now, there are better days ahead. We just need to believe and trust in Jesus. Jesus gives us hope. Hope in Jesus. The woman with the hemorrhage, Jarius, they hoped in Jesus that Jesus could help them, and Jesus did. And it doesn't mean that, if we come to Jesus and pray to Jesus or are baptized, that tomorrow all of our problems will disappear, that we'll be healed from all of our sicknesses. It doesn't mean that immediately we're going to be better. But we need to hope that Jesus will make things better. We need to have faith. Believe. Just believe. Have faith. Remember, faith leads to action. That we'll continue to trust in Jesus. We'll continue to pray. We'll continue to worship him. We'll continue on in our faith. Because we know that really only Jesus can give us hope. Only Jesus can heal us. Only Jesus can give us what we need in our lives. Only Jesus can heal us spiritually. Again, trust in Jesus, that things will get better. Remember that God will act in his time. Be patient. Sometimes we want these problems to be over with tomorrow, but they will eventually. God will act in his time. We just need to be patient. Remember that God cares for you. He loves you. He knows what's going on. Things will get better. Things will get better. Just need to believe and not be afraid. If you have any need to come forward as we stand and sing, I just encourage you to come forward.